Cool. All right, folks, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. All right, so this is the pre-recorded session that you guys asked for because, as I mentioned, I have to carry my 2-month-old son for his shots today. Well, when you're watching this, it's Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025, right? And the appointment was 10:30, so of course I couldn't have a 10 to 12 class, right? Now, I'm just checking to see if everything is working properly because I had an issue last year where a couple of times I had a short in the cord for the microphone and nothing recorded for the the entire YouTube thing. So I was thankful that I had a backup stream on TikTok, which I'm also monitoring here. Right? Okay, cool. So folks, so you know our sessions are 2 hours, but since this is a pre-recorded one, it's probably not going to cross into 2 hours because like when I give you guys a chance to try the question, I'm just going to tell you to pause the video, try the question, and then unpause. So that I'm not going to wait like 10 minutes doing nothing, right? So the video time will probably be shorter than 2 hours, all right? So we are now officially in module 2. Okay, so we have, let's just pull up a calendar, and it's kind of small. I don't know if you'll see it well. So 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks in January, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks in February. The 1st of March might not be any class because it's Carnival Saturday, and I know some of you guys fet, but if you all are willing to have class that day, I am probably willing because I am not fetting. All right, so let me say 4 Saturdays in March. So we had 12 sessions, and then we have 4 sessions in April. Right now, I'll double check when the term ends. Actually, let me Google that one time. Academic calendar, Trinidad, 2025. Right. So January, April 11th. Okay, cool. Right. Sorry. So April 11th is here. Okay. So what's going to happen? We're probably going to have class the 5th and the 12th, and then during here will be the Easter break, and we'll put some more classes there. All right. Yeah, just saying to people on TikTok, I'm just recording some stuff here. So if I do hail it out, don't feel all right. Thanks. Yeah. So we'll probably get the 16 sessions, if not 18, and that should be sufficient to finish the entire syllabus, right? Now, worst case scenario, we end up missing days for whatever reason. I have replays of all of the classes from my previous 2 or 3 times doing the topic, right? Doing the what you call it, Unit 2, Module 2, and Module 3. So fear not. If for whatever reason things don't go according to plan, as they often do not, we have contingencies in place. So fear not. All right. Okay. With that said, let me just pull up the syllabus real quick. So we in Module 2, Costing Systems, right? So describe the use of various costing systems. So we have job costing, activity-based, process costing. I'm not seeing service sector costing here, right? Now, if anybody doesn't have a copy of the syllabus, you could just message me. I'll send it to you. That's not a problem. All right. We're going to be working job costing first. Next week, we'll talk about over and under absorb. We're going to talk about some journal entries as well. All right. The ABC is also like session 3. It's like job costing session 3. All right. Process costing will probably be there for in February. And it's the service sector costing. So we're going to go straight to the past papers for that one. And then here, all this stuff here. A lot of these things I don't do. We could just go to AI for that and ask them some stuff here, or check your textbooks. Marginal and absorption costing. I love that topic, and I've messed up the last 2 times I tried to teach it. Anyhow, I'm veering off into a whole different thing I didn't want to do, which is just talk for the sake of talking. So let's get on with today's work, right? So again, we are dealing with costing systems. Now we know that we are in Unit 2, which is cost and management accounting. So those of you who've been here a while know my spiel, my shtick, right? I have 1 or 2 new people, including I think Haley and maybe one other person. So you may not be familiar with how I kind of do the class or get people's brain into a bit of a mind space or a mind frame, right? So why do we start a business? Now you have many reasons, but the primary reason we focus on for the sake of simplicity is we get into business to make a profit. What is the simple formula for profit? Selling price minus cost price. But selling price is actually based on cost price. If you think about it, if you think about your markup or your margin, however you want to go it, let's talk about markup, right? If you buy something for $10 and you want to make a profit, you're going to sell it for a price higher than $10. You might even think, okay, well, I want to make $8 profit off of it. So $8 is going to add to the 10, and you're going to get a selling price at $18. Cool. So you're going to cover your cost of $10 and have some left over to give you profit, right? Because you want to, of course, make money for yourself, right? Now, sometimes it wouldn't just be a dollar figure. You might have a percentage because you may be selling multiple items, different items, and you think, okay, look, I want to make a 40% profit across the board for everything. So let's say we took that same $10 item. 40% of 10 is 4. 10 plus 4 is 14. And that's where you get a selling price. So profit is equal to selling price minus cost price. But selling price is based on cost price. And cost price is usually total cost divided by total number of units. Unless, of course, you're dealing with a service environment where there is a slightly different approach there. But that means we have to be able to compile total costs. So that's why we are doing what we are doing, cost accounting. We are learning to capture costs. We are learning to develop costing systems in different costing environments, right? So before I go off on a whole tangent, because I have notes to give, right? And again, I had to watch myself time-wise because I actually have to stop sooner than I would like to. Anyhow, so we're going to be talking about job costing, right? Now, we have job costing, process costing, right? Job costing is used in situations where the producers or the business people are making customized things or one-off things. So for example, you go to a hairdresser, your treatment is probably unique to you, all right? Or let's say you go to a tailor to get something made, or a seamstress to get something made for grad. Your suit or your gown, right, will be specific to you, your measurements, your color, your fabric, your style, your appointments, whatever the case is, right? When people build in houses, right? We don't just have cookie cutter houses, and this is like a government development, and no shade to that at all. It's still a housing development. But people, like for me, I live in the West, right? And when I'm driving home, I often see houses on top of the hills in different, well, certain areas, right? And these things look magnificent. And I'm like, how much money I had to make to pay for that, right? But again, there's no other house like it in Trinidad, right? And you drive around different areas in different parts of the country, you can see that same thing, right? So certain units of output are unique, and we call those jobs. And we have to find a way to cost the job, because imagine you were the one building the house, and you want to make profit. So you have to cover your costs, and you have to add on extra on top of that to make it worth your while. Because you can't just be breaking even, making exactly the amount of money it costs you to provide the service. You want compensation beyond that. Right? So job costing is that costing system that is used in an environment where we have unique units of output. Anyhow, before I ramble on, right? So what I did is I just kind of repurposed last year's notes. I'm going to type them fresh and talk through them, because you know me, I don't like static notes. I feel like when people put up static notes and just read from it is laziness. Right? That is not something I like, and therefore I like to do. Hey, Gabe, good evening. How you doing? Sorry, I see one of my friend's sons online there. All right, cool. Okay, so let's start talking. So different business entities. And of course, you're free to take the notes down if you want, but I'm going to send a PDF after class with all the notes. So if you prefer to listen and absorb or take little short notes, that's perfectly fine as well, right? So different business entities engage in different business activities. Right, for example, right, buying and reselling goods, right, which is usually like trading. When you have your trading account and you have sales minus cost of goods sold, and you have opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock, etc., right? So you buy to resell. Right, or manufacturing and selling goods. So instead of buying goods to resell, you buy your materials, you create your output, and you sell that. Right, selling goods or providing services. Right, as such, right, each type of entity. Right, if you see me looking across this side, because that's what my notes are. Right, this It's not off the top of my head. When I did it the first time, it was off the top of my head, but now I just use my notes to kind of guide me, right? Entity would have a, right, different what we call costing environment or environment according to your preferred pronunciation, right? And we'll need a costing system to facilitate the effective capture of costs and subsequent attachment, of said costs to finished units of output. Right, so we have, so each entity, so like I said, you could have people doing job costing, like unique units of output specific to the customer. And you also have, the contrast was what we call a process costing environment, where things are mass produced. For example, like if you think of like soft drink production, right? You just make a big vat of soft drink and put it in bottles, right? And each unit is indistinguishable from the next, right? Now we're going to deal with process costing in a few weeks, right? But that's the juxtaposition, that's the comparison and the contrast. So in those situations, it's a little, I don't want to say easier to take total cost and divide by number of units, because it's going to be the same exact unit being made over and over, hence mass produced. They're all perfectly fungible, all right? See if you know what that word means. Anyhow, right? So, right, we want to have a costing system that allows us to capture all the costs incurred, all, right? Every single thing, and then somehow, right, attach those costs to units of output, right? In order to be able to literally cover the costs and earn a profit, right? So, there are 4 types of costing systems that we will explore. All right, so 1 is job costing, which is the one we're doing the next few weeks, right? Today and the next day, activity-based costing. This is like a kind of answer to the problems of job costing, which we will talk about a bit later, all right? Process costing and service sector costing. Okay, right. So again, if you want, you could take a screenshot, you could pause the video, take all your notes, or just get the PDF, right? But I do encourage you to write over your notes in your own style and paraphrase or fix the wording, make the notes your own, right? Okay, so components of job cost. So even when we were doing module 1 and we were tackling manufacturing accounts, I was telling you guys, always remember there are 3 components of cost in any manufacturing environment. Well, in most manufacturing environments, direct materials, direct labor, and overheads. So there's only 3 components you have to worry about. Direct materials, direct labor are usually relatively easy to capture and deal with. Overheads, that's where the problem starts. And that's where we have to get creative and use our intelligence, right? So direct materials, direct labor, hold on, why is it not matching up? Oh, I put an extra space, right? Right, and overheads, also called indirect costs, right? Okay, cool. We have a couple of, combinations, right? So if you take direct materials and you add direct labor, we get prime costs. If you take direct labor and you add overheads, you get what you call conversion costs. All right, conversion costs are the cost to convert materials into finished units, raw materials into finished units, right? So materials and labor, direct materials and direct labor, those are your prime costs, and direct labor and overhead as a conversion cost. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna just get a little water. Okay, So direct materials and direct labor are usually easily traceable to jobs, units of output, right? So however, direct material and direct labor are usually easily traceable to jobs. However, overheads tend not to be as easily traceable to jobs. Now, what does that mean? If you make a cake, you know how much flour, how much sugar, how much water, how much oil, etc., went into making the cake. But how much depreciation from the stove or the oven went in? How much depreciation from the mixer, right? Certain things are a little more difficult to tell. Maybe it was a bigger cake, it required some more depreciation. We don't know, right? Maybe even if it was bigger, the ingredients were different, right? There are all sorts of different things, right? Maybe now with AI, we could sort out all them problems, or in a couple of years, who knows, right? But for right now, that's the issue, right? There's also the issue that the actual overheads incurred, right, are only known after the job is completed, right? Exactly. So how do we know how much electricity we're going to incur? How do we know how much depreciation or machine maintenance we'll have to incur? How much janitorial services? We don't, right? So what happens is we need to estimate those things, and estimates are where problems start, right? But we need to be able to give the customer a quote for the job. That is an estimate of the cost, right? Before the job is started. As such, estimates, sorry, one sec. Right. As such, estimates of overheads well, I have here very much needed. Not the best phrase, but it'll work, right? So yeah, so when people are doing construction projects, we know that we're not going to know the exact cost beforehand, right? A lot of times there are what you call cost overruns and time overruns, because sometimes there are delays, shortages, materials not there. Like we know when COVID passed through, there were lots of shortages, and even now sometimes in the grocery you can't find certain things you used to find a bit more easily or even consistently, right? My biggest one right now is my older son's formula, right? He uses a stage 3 in the item, and we haven't been able to find it for months. And one of my wife's friends actually called one of the reps in the company who she knows, and she said, yeah, they're not coming until, 2025. So we were using the stage 2 for him, and even that has run out. So we're down to stage 1, which seems to be in the good supply. And thankfully, because a 2-month-old is using the stage 1. Anyhow, okay, cool. Right, so that's the first set of notes there. I have a second set of notes, right, which is going to talk about dealing with the overheads. Sorry, I was talking about cost overruns and short, right? So yeah, sorry about that. So what happens is you get a quote for building the house, and you usually have to make, even with banks, what they do is when they're providing a loan for this construction, they'll make allowance for like a 10 to 50% cost overrun, right? Because they know it happens, all right? And that's one of the problems, right? Anyhow, so dealing with overheads, all right? So, to estimate overheads, the overheads incurred on a job, a predetermined CD Bauant, hello, right? Overhead application rate is used. Hold on. Oh, because I put a comma? Wow. Sorry, one second. Let me just fix my stuff there. Oh, thanks for liking the live. Tell your pops I said hi. And Until my controller reaching the skybox, I should get it next week. And thanks for the suggestion. Anyhow, sorry guys, I was just talking to my cousin's daughter. Right, so this usually starts with an estimate of the overheads that will be incurred for a period. Perdido. I talk in Spanish now, right? And an estimate of the overhead application base, which is also called the cost driver, is also made, right? So yeah, with overheads, it tends to be something that causes the overheads to be incurred. So for example, electricity, the length of time for which the lights are on, the number of machines and their power consumption are the cost driver. So the level of output could be a cost driver for electricity, all right? Rent. So rents, I mean, it's usually a fixed cost. It doesn't increase with the number of units, but the amount of square footage or space that a department has is usually what will determine what share of the rent is apportioned to that particular department, right? The more room you use, the more rent you pay. Simple and straightforward. So overheads, again, are indirect costs that are not easily or directly traceable to units of output, right? They're just sort of there, all right? And we have to somehow apply them or attach them to units of output. And we need some sort of logical or rational basis to do so. So we have to determine what is the cost driver? What causes these overhead costs to be incurred? What drives these costs up? Long story short, right? So you do an investigation, you come up with rational bases, rational cost drivers, also called application and application base, and you use that, all right? So the overhead application base slash cost driver is the item that is assumed to cause the incurrence of all overheads. Right, because as you can imagine, there are many different items under the umbrella term of overheads, right? But under what we call, well, what we're doing here, which is traditional costing, we try to figure out one item, one cost driver that drives all overheads, which is actually a criticism and flaw in this particular method, traditional costing, and which will be dealt with when we do activity-based costing. But we'll come to that in 2 weeks, okay? All right, so in labor-intensive environments, all right, in labor-intensive production environments, all right, direct labor hours is direct labor hours, right here, is assumed to drive the incurrence of overheads on jobs, right? So for example, if job A requires more labor hours, direct labor hours than say job B, then it may be safe to assume that the former, which is job A, incurs more overheads than the latter, job B, right? So what I mean by that is that in a labor-intensive environment, which is where you have a lot of people working as opposed to machines, you have a larger proportion of labor versus capital, right? So because of that, and because of that, the assumption is made that here, so direct labor hours, people are the cost driver. So how many ever hours are worked, that's going to be our cost driver. All right. All right. So by the same token, right, in capital intensive production environments, right, the number of machine hours is, is what will be used as the cost driver. The item that causes overheads to be incurred. Right, so you have labor-intensive production environments and you have capital-intensive production environments where you have more machines than people. So the number of hours for which these machines run is what is assumed to drive all of the costs. Again, it's a simplification and it is flawed, and we'll be dealing with that, the rectification of that, when we get to activity-based costing. Okay, hey Nick, with vibes. All right. Right, so the formula for the predetermined overhead application rate, right, POHR, predetermined overhead rate, or OAR, which is the overhead application rate, is as follows. Nice, Simmons, vibes. Right, so POHR is equal to the estimated overheads incurred divided by the estimated application base volume, right? So you could use application base volume or cost driver volume. I am a bit more partial to cost driver volume, but again, you should be able to use both and understand that both mean the same thing, right? So long story short, you're dividing the total cost by the number of hours, be it direct labor hours or machine hours, to find the cost per hour. And you're actually going to use that as your rate to attach costs to units of output, depending on how many of these hours, labor hours or machine hours, these units of output use, right? So the criticism of this method of dealing with overheads, right? So the fundamental flaw in this method of dealing with overheads is that it lumps together or pools all overheads and assumes that they are all equally driven by the same application base or cost driver. Hence, I use the word driven, right, to kind of reference what the cost driver, right? So it assumes that all overheads are determined by this one cost driver, which is not necessarily true, all right? So this is usually not true for most production environments. But it is an easy way to deal with overheads and to arrive at a cost estimate faster. Hey Zia, how you doing? Thanks for liking. Appreciate it. Let's get a little water. Oh, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 5,000 for the last several months. Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. So activity based costing overcomes this issue by having a separate or unique application base and rate for each item of overhead. All right. This will be discussed in more detail later on. All right. Okay, let me just make sure everything fits, everything's visible. Okay, yeah, we're looking good. Right, so that's the end of today's notes. So we're gonna now do an example of job order costing, and then we're gonna tackle about 3, I'm hoping 4 questions, but again, I have a time limit here. I have to get home for a particular time, and before that I have to break down all the machines and disconnect them, pack them up, and all kind of thing, right? So yeah, one sec. Oh yeah, wow, that was a good stretch. Okay, so let's get to that example, okay? So example 1, so we're gonna zoom out a little bit so we can see things a bit more easily, right? So job order costing example 1. So again, what we are trying to do here, always keep in mind what it is you're trying to do. Always have that fundamental idea in the forefront of your mind. I'm trying to determine the cost of this unit of output, what I'm calling a job, a unique unit of output for a specific customer, right? Maybe I'm doing a custom suit, maybe I'm doing a custom shoe, maybe I am creating a computer to someone's specifications, right? Maybe I'm baking a cake, preparing a meal. In that, I'm going to have materials, right? And depending on the item, the materials, of course, will be different. I'm not going to use the same ingredients to make a cake as I am to make a computer, in which case it's either going to be a real crunchy cake or a very useless computer. I don't know, right? So we have materials. And of course, somebody had to put the materials together and make sure everything is in proper working order in the case of the computer, and of course, making sure it's properly prepared in the case of the cake, right? So here I'm making custom order cakes, right? So I'm making a cake. I have materials, I have a cost. I have labor, I have a cost. And I have all these other costs apart from materials and labor called overheads. So I have to somehow figure out how to attach overheads to my output. Materials and labor, easier, right? So Felicity Springs makes custom order cakes. The most recent order has the following info. So direct labor, so the hours worked, right? Direct, so DLH stands for direct labor hours, is 8. The cost per direct labor hour is $25, right? So the total cost for direct labor is simply the product multiplying 8 by 25. 8 hours multiplied by $25 per hour, that's 200. Materials cost is 300. Okay, cool. So 200 plus 300 is 500. Nice. So that's materials and labor. That's your prime cost. But your overhead, so Felicity uses direct labor hours as her overhead application base. Right, it makes sense because you're working in an environment where you have a chef and maybe a couple of other people, right? Of course, they are going to be using mixers and ovens and whatever else, right? But primarily the person is doing most of the work, right? The tools help them to, of course, perform their job, right, more easily or effectively. Right? Now here is where it gets interesting, right? So Felicity uses direct labor hours as the application base. So remember what the note said, right? It said usually, right, you're going to have to determine an estimate, right, of the overheads, estimate the overheads, and estimate the application base, and then divide, right? So that's what we're doing here. Okay, so we have an estimated value of overheads of $12,500. All right, an estimated direct labor hours in a month, so direct labor hours. Right, so we have to find the cost of the job. So the cost of the job is simply the sum of materials, labor, and overheads applied, right? So direct materials. Right, now you could head it up properly. Felicity Springs, calculation of cost of job number, blah, blah, blah. Right, so that is simply 300. There's no calculation in that. It's just simply plug and play, as I like to say. All right. Evening Shan. The direct labor will have a calculation. So direct labor is 8 direct labor hours, then multiplied by $25 per direct labor hour. So 8 by 25, like I said, is 200. Now we have to find the overheads applied. Right, now it said that we're using direct labor hours. So how many direct labor hours were used on this job? Right, that's 25. But by what are we multiplying that 25 direct labor hours? That is where the overhead application rate comes in. So just like how you have a direct labor rate, it's 8. Sorry, I said the wrong thing. My bad. I apologize. Yeah, sorry, it's 8 direct labor hours. So what are we multiplying that 8 by? To calculate direct labor, you multiply it by what we call the labor rate, right? The cost per labor hour. So here now we're going to have a cost per overhead, right? An overhead cost per labor hour. Sorry, I said the wrong thing. And all we have to do is divide these two things, right? So the calculation of the predetermined overhead rate. So we have the estimated overheads for the months. Let's put this here. All right, so 12,005 divided by 2005 will give us, hold on, Swaggy Kelly. Oh, sorry. I see these names on TikTok, some people pop in sometimes now. So have to pronounce them. Right. So we're going to take this and divide by that, and we're going to get $5 per direct labor hour. Right? So now we are going to take our 8 direct labor hours and multiply it by the overhead application rate, or the POH, or the predetermined overhead rate. The overhead rate, right? So 8 direct labor hours multiplied by $5 per direct labor hour. So it's equal to 8 by 5, which is 40. And we're going to add up those. Boom, $540. And that there is the total cost of the job. Right? So let's just recap. We have to calculate the cost of the job. Cost of production has 3 components: materials, labor, and overheads. Materials and labor are usually pretty easy. Most times they'll give you what the materials is, or a simple calculation to find it. Same thing for direct labor, right? They might give you the number of hours and the rate per hour. So you multiply, all right? The overheads, you have a few steps there. You have to find the overhead application rate, or the predetermined overhead rate. To do that, we need to know what the overheads is, the estimate for the overheads, and the estimate of the cost driver or application base. In this case, they told us, right, that is direct labor hours. All right, Felicity uses direct labor hours as the overhead application base. They told us that outright. So what we have to do is divide 12,005 divided by 2005, $5 per hour. And then multiply that by labor hours, because that is the basis we use to apply overheads. All right, okay, 8 by 5 is 40, and you add up going down. Cool. So that is how we approach job costing questions. Of course, yes, they can come a bit more involved, a bit more difficult. Yes, that's perfectly normal and expected, but at the heart of it, the concepts do not change. You still have 3 components of cost, and the overheads, of course, will be the trickiest one. Okay, so we're just about at the 40-minute mark. So like I said, now is when you guys get to try some questions, right? So I'm going to send the PDF with the past paper questions and stuff. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the 2015 question. Daily. So again, you should have this question, this PDF. All right. So daily, and this is the 2015 question, right? So if you want, you can take a screenshot, you can open the PDF, whatever the case is, you can do this up, all right? Daily has been asked to submit a bid on 2 prospective jobs, one for Caribbean Sun Limited and the other for West Indies Star Limited. The company uses a job costing system and applies overheads using machine hours. So the overheads are applied using machine hours. So machine hours is the cost driver, the overhead application base. total overhead for the year is expected to be $500,000. So right away, you have your estimated overhead, and it is expected that 40,000 machine hours will be worked. And look, you have your estimate of your application base. So to find the rate, the overhead rate, you can simply divide 500 by the 40, right? Information relating to prospective jobs have been provided as follows, right? So materials, labor, we have other direct expenses, which of course you're going to have to include in the calculation. And then we have machine hours, right? You can ignore the rest of these things here. That'll come into play when we do activity-based costing. But for now, you can ignore everything else down here. We are simply going to take into consideration machine hours, right? So they want the total cost of each job, assuming overhead is applied at a rate of $12.50 per machine hour. And look at that. They gave you, sorry, what? What? Sorry. Yeah, they gave you the, whatchamacallit? The rate. So you didn't have to calculate. So, because 500 divided by 40 is 1250. All right. Okay. Yeah, I will definitely check that out later. Yeah, okay. So again, all you're doing is you're gonna take direct materials, direct labor, direct expenses, and you're gonna have a line for overheads, right? And then for the overhead, you're gonna take the 1250, which is the rate, and you're gonna multiply it, well, by the machine hours, because the machine hours is the application base, right? Okay, so for Caribbean Sun and for West Indies Star, that's what I'm gonna have you do, right? So again, pause the video, try the question, and then unpause it. Okay, so I'll take it that you're either finished or you're not sure what to do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work Caribbean Sun for you first, and then you can pause again and try West Indies Star. All right, and no shame if you didn't feel comfortable or wasn't sure what to do. All right, so calculation of the cost of these two jobs. So we have direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, and overheads applied. Overheads. Right. So again, you're taking 25,000 there, the 36,000, the 20,000, and they gave you the 2,500. You're multiplying that by 12.5. Right, so that's going to be equal to 2,500 by 12.5. And you add up going down, and we get 112,250. Right, so if you weren't sure what to do, I just did the piece of the question as an example, so you could pause again and try West Indies Star Limited. Right, so we're going to put 30,000, 35,000, 15,000, and then here it's going to be 6,000 by 1250. Oh, sorry, and all we have to do is add up, right? 155. Cool. So that's the first question out of the way there, right? I would say give me a Genie chat if you're good with that, but we have no chat going on, right? Now, again, if you all have any trouble with any of these questions, you can always send me a pic on WhatsApp. Again, not in the group, unless you don't mind sharing what it is you're working on with everybody else, which could be a good thing because you never know if anybody else is having the same problem you're having, right? Feel free to send it to me directly, ask your question, say, hey, Chris, I didn't follow what you do here. You could explain this to me again. Let me know, right? Give me information so I could help you. Oh, okay. Right. All right. So the next question we're going to tackle is the 2017 question. Right? So hope that's big enough. It looks big enough. All right. Hey, Kyle, evening. Yeah, man. Happy New Year to you too. I saw your message on TikTok. Thanks very much, man. I'm just doing a little pre-recording for our class. I'm missing tomorrow. Anyhow, right, so Paton Manufacturing has estimated the following overhead costs and activity drivers for the next financial year. Now, hold on, just now. What went on here? Right. Just give me 1 sec. My wife messaging. Yeah, sorry. Right. Okay, so sorry, Payton, right. So setup, maintenance, inspection. We have a cost for each of them, and we have an activity drive for each. So now, this is more in the realm of activity-based costing, but the question does have us do, what you call it, job costing. I'll tell you how to do it, right? So overheads are currently applied using direct labor hours. So that's what we're going to do, right? So overheads are currently applied using direct labor hours and an expected capacity of 100,000 direct labor hours. So just like in the previous question, where we had 500,000 of overheads and 40,000 of machine hours, and we divided to get the 1250, we have to do something similar here. So we have the labor hours, the total labor hours, which are what we are using to apply overheads. But now we have to find the overheads, and I'll give it that one freebie, right? Just add these three costs. So 650, 800, 500. I think that gives us 1,950,000 for overheads, right? So that's 1.95 million. So you're going to divide that by 100,000 to find the overhead application rate, right? So the company has been invited to bid on a job, XYZ, to manufacture 600 units and has assembled the following data relating to the job. So materials, labor, and then you have the number of each of those items, right? Now, don't worry about what we're doing here and here. It says activity-based. Don't worry about that. I want you to calculate the cost of making these 600 units using traditional costing, right? So we have the materials, we have the labor, and we know that it's going to take how many hours, boy? 300 hours. It's going to take 300 hours. So what you have to do is take the 1.95 million divided by the 100,000, get that rate and multiply it by the 300 to give us the total cost. All right. All right. Now they did ask for the unit cost, which is the cost per unit. So we'll come to that after. If you know how to do that, then go ahead, right? So here's where you're going to pause and you're going to calculate the cost of the job, and then you're going to unpause and check out the solution, right? All right, cool. Sorry, I was waiting. Anyhow, I did what I said I wasn't going to do. Okay, cool. All right, so calculating the cost. Ready? So it says the unit cost, which is the cost for each unit. Right, so let's just go down here. Right, so we have direct materials, which is 15,000. Right, direct labor, which is 6,000. And then we have the overheads. Right, right. So to do that, we first have to calculate the overhead rate. All right, so the overhead rate is the total overhead. So what we're going to do, let's go back up here. And we're going to show, right? So we're going to show setup. Setup cost, 650, 123. Maintenance, 800,000. Inspection, 500,000. Right. So total estimated overheads. Right, and we have to divide by the estimated cost driver volume, which is direct labor hours, right? So that's 300, 100,000. Right, the 300 is for this job, right? No, it's 600, right? So 1950, so $19.50 per direct labor hour. All right, Darcel, as in Kadrin? What's going on? Yeah, okay. So we're going to take that 1950 and we're going to multiply it by 300. Was I? We're on Happy New Year, boy. Yeah, vibes. Right. So we have 300 direct labor hours multiplied by 1950 per direct labor hour. All right, so that's equal to 300 by 1.95, 19.5. All right, cool. Right, so now we're going to add those together. Yeah, man, thanks very much. So 26,850. Right, so that's the total cost of the job, right? You're gone? Yeah, man, later. Right, so now the question actually wanted us to find the unit cost, which is the cost for 1 unit. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to divide by the number of units, which is 600, because that's what it was, right? Yeah, 600 units. So that's this divided by that. So about $44.75 per unit. So let's maximize that, right? That's the solution. There, again, you guys should have different layouts. There's no one correct or mandatory layout in cost accounting, right? It's just a calculation, and there are different ways you can present your calculation, right? Some people, instead of putting this here, what they would do is they'd have 2 columns, right? And this column here would have these figures. And if there's any working, what would happen is it would happen in this column here. So like this would be shifted across here. They would have put the 300 multiplied by 1950, and the 50 would have gone across, right? But I used to do it like that to provide a lot more detail, but I just find this is a little more efficient. But again, it's simply a matter of preference, right? Okay, guys, I think I have time for one more, which is the 2018 question. Let me just double check. Yeah, 2018. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. So we'll take a little read here, right? So again, if you need to zoom in, you could do that. So Lasmoy Limited manufactures a product using resources from 2 departments, X and Y. Overhead is applied in each department to reflect the characteristics of the department. So labor intensive versus capital intensive, right? The characteristics. Department X has a large contingent of employees who are responsible for the first stage of production, which is labor intensive, right? Department Y is predominantly automated and is heavily dependent on machines to complete the production process. So capital intensive, right? So the following additional information is available, right? So budgeted amounts for direct labor costs, machine hours, factory overheads, right? So labor costs, machine hours, overheads, right? So remember, Department X is labor intensive, Department Y is capital intensive, and the accounting records of the company show the following data for Job 748. Right, so Job 748 spent some time in Department X and incurred these costs and this many machine hours, and in Department Y, these costs for materials and labor and this many machine hours. So we have 3 things to do here, all right? So we have to find the overhead rate for each department, right? So what that means is you're going to take the overheads and divide by whatever the cost driver is, all right? So in the case of Department X, you're going to use labor costs, right, as the application base. So you'll take the 900 and divide by that. In Department Y, you'll take your 660, your overheads, and divide by machine hours, because remember, Department Y was machine intensive. All right, I kind of given away how to do these things, am I not? Sorry about that. Okay, so what you could do, if you want, you could pause here, right? And then when you unpause, I'll kind of give hints as to the rest of it, right? So if you pause, I'm still going to kind of talk to some of the question, right? If you didn't know what to do, well, I'm going to explain a little more, right? So in the first part of the question here, you're just going to take this and divide by 600, because in Department X, it's labor intensive, right? So let's go there. Sorry. Right, so estimated overheads, right? So 600 to 3. No, I'm going to divide by estimated cost driver volume, which was direct labor costs in one thing, and then machine hours in the other instance, right? So direct labor cost, oh, sorry, it was 900, my bad. And then we're just going to divide. All right. And if it didn't do department Y, again, you're taking the factory overheads and dividing by the machine hours, because department Y is capital intensive as per the information in the question, right? So estimated overheads, 660 and 80 and 8.25. Okay, cool. All right, the next thing they want is the calculation of the total, hold on, huh? Can I come out a little bit? Yeah. Of the total overhead costs for job 748. Now it says the accounting records for the company show the following data for job 748. So they have materials, labor costs, and machine hours, right? So the overheads, right? Remember in department X, they base it on direct labor costs, and in department Y, they base it on machine hours. So you're going to take each of these rates and multiply by the applicable item for each department. So I'll give you, sorry, you could pause the video now and then unpause it to see the working and the correction. Right, so let's go. So we're taking the predetermined overhead rate. Right, so that was, sorry, give me one sec, my bad. Cool. Yeah. So the predetermined overhead is 150, and we are multiplying by the cost driver volume. So in department X, that was direct labor cost, and department Y will be machine hours, right? So direct labor cost was 14,000. So that's 210. And then here now, the predetermined rate is 825, and the machine hours there is 6,000. And you're gonna get 49,500. Right. Now the last thing they want is the unit cost of job 748, which consists of 200 units of product. So the unit cost, right, of job 748, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so right, so you have, so the unit cost is the total cost divided by the number of units. So first step is total cost, which is materials plus labor plus the overheads. So do that for X and Y, materials plus labor plus overheads, right? And then after you do that, when you get the total cost, it's just going to divide by 200. Right, so you could pause now, and then, well, I guess you're unpausing now, right? If you didn't finish it, you could pause it now again. Anyhow, right, so I'm going to correct now. All right, so now you could do it with two departments, X and Y, and have a total column. I'm going to do a bit of an abridged version, right? So direct materials, you have 130,000 for department X, plus 21,000 for department Y. That's 151,000, and you have direct labor costs. Right, so that's 14,000 plus 6,000, which of course is 20,000. And then you have overheads applied, which is the sum of these two figures, right? Hold on, sorry, is it 210? Oh, sorry, I have an extra 0 here. Oh, my bad. Right. My bad. Wow. What a mistake I make up. Right. Okay. So is equal to this item plus this item here, right? Okay, cool. We add that up. Right. So the total cost. All right. So total cost, right? And now we're going to divide by the number of units. Number of units. right, which is 200. And then that's just going to be $1,207.50, right? So this is the unit cost of job 748, right? Okay, so folks, yeah, that's about it for today because I had to stop now, right? So again, I will send a PDF with all the notes from today, all the solutions, right? And the questions, obviously the questions, the past paper questions, right? And of course, if you have any questions or had any difficulty, please do let me know. All right, so I look forward to seeing you all on the 11th, right? I know I have a luncheon to go to, but that's obviously lunch. So that's after classes has ended. All right. Anyhow, guys, so you have a good week. And of course, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm only a WhatsApp or a call